All right, Lions fans, what is going on? Listen, I apologize for that light angling through my window. Not a whole lot I can do about that, but we are here anyway. Now, what we're talking about today is I was reading an article yesterday that was talking about the Myles Garrett trade. I know you've all heard about it. Myles Garrett being traded from the Cleveland Browns to the Los Angeles Rams. And the point of the article was what why don't the Lions ever make deals like this? What do the Lions need to do? The Lions need to go out and make a big trade or a big deal in order to be a contender. Why don't the Lions ever push their chips to the table? You know, you think about teams like the Green Bay Packers in our division. They go out in 2025 and they get Micah Parsons, you know, which was a big deal, a huge trade, big high-end top 2, top 3 pass rusher in the league, and they went out and got him. And the Lions fans are scratching their heads saying, how come we didn't do that? Remember back in I think it was 2019, the Bears go and get Khalil Mack in his prime. I still remember that first game that Khalil Mack was in Chicago, and he had something crazy, like he forced like 2 fumbles, had a pass deflection, an interception, and like a sack, something crazy in just one game. And of course, it left us Lions fans saying, you know, what about us? Why didn't we try to get Khalil Mack? Why didn't we try to bring him in? Why don't the Lions ever go out and make any of these big trades and bring the high-end players in here, you know, to, make the Lions a contender? So it got me to thinking. And all the 50 years I've been living, and I've been a Lions fan for all 50 of those years, even the years I can barely remember, I was born into this. I started thinking, who have the Lions ever brought in? Like, what are some of the biggest trades that the Lions have ever had? What are some of the biggest trades the Lions have ever made? Now, I'm going to be honest. I looked up, I had to do some research and look up 5, but I already knew who the number 1 was. That one I already knew. But the other 4, I kind of was, amazed and kind of thought about them, and I thought to myself, like, some of those, I was around for, but I didn't really remember them being trades. And I had to look up the details and what made them the trade so significant. So here we go. We are going to start with number 5, and that is Dick LeBeau. The Lions traded for Dick LeBeau, and let me give you some back in 1959. And this is what they said was important about this trade. LeBeau became one of the greatest defensive backs in NFL history. We also know that he was a great defensive coordinator. He later became a Hall of Fame coach and remains one of the most influential figures in football history. Also, it says the move paid dividends for decades in franchise history. Now, it didn't really give me a lot of why that move made so many was positive for the Lions for decades. But I do remember Dick LeBeau. I do remember he played for the Lions. Of course, I don't remember him as a Lion, but I remember he played for the Lions. But as I mentioned, he was more known for being a legendary defensive coach. For years, that man was the driving force behind the Steelers defense. And he was there, man, I want to say well over 30 years being being a defensive coordinator, a good defensive coordinator. And he just actually recently retired. So that is Dick LeBeau, number 5, one I did not know about. Number 4, somebody who I do know about, somebody who was during my lifetime, was Chris Spielman, the leader, the middle linebacker of those Lions defenses in the late 80s and the early 90s. Let me give you a little bit about what it said about Chris Spielman. Why it mattered back in 1988. The Lions acquired one of the greatest defensive players in franchise history. No argument there. Chris Spielman was an absolute rock in the middle of that defense for the Lions. It says that Spielman became the heart and soul of Detroit's defense throughout the late 80s and early 90s. All through years where I was going to Lions games, and I remember Chris Spielman very well. And it says he remains one of the most beloved Lions ever, and that is true. He is part of the front office right now. Chris Spielman is doing his thing. Chris Spielman, as you see right there, I mean, look at him. I mean, just controlling the middle of the field, with the pad, in his shoulders, just old school linebacker feel in the late 80s, early 90s. That is Chris Spielman. Now, what I didn't know, people, was that the Lions traded for Chris Spielman. I thought that, I was a youngin' back then. I thought that he probably was a draft pick. Had no idea that they actually traded for Chris Spielman, but they did. And that's how the Lions got Chris Spielman. I don't exactly know the details of how they got him, but we got him, and he is absolutely an all-time, he is absolutely an all-time great Lion. Which brings us to number 3, a guy who you have seen in my highlight film, quarterback Bobby Lane. When I say my highlight film, I mean in our introduction, Bobby Lane. Let me give you what it says about Bobby Lane. It says that Bobby Lane in 1958, why is legendary? Lane was one of the greatest quarterbacks in franchise history. Now, that he absolutely was. There is a reason why I put him in the beginning of our intro. Before Jared Goff got here, Bobby Lane was the second greatest Lions quarterback. And before Matthew Stafford, he was the greatest Lions quarterback. Yes, that is true. He's one of the most legendary quarterbacks in franchise history. Really, we only have about 3. The trade allegedly led to the famous curse of Bobby Lane, where Lane supposedly predicted the Lions would not win for 50 years. So that 50 years has passed. If that is true, we are past those days and we can move on. And it says, whether you believe the curse or not, it's arguably the most famous trade in Lions lore. And that is true, because he did put that curse out there. He did say that the Lions wouldn't win anything for 50 years, and the Lions have been pretty bad for most of those 50 years. So that is quarterback Bobby Lane, number 3. Another guy who I did not know that the Lions were involved with a trade, which brings us to number 2, a guy that a lot of you will remember, Roy Williams. Now, Roy Williams was part of that 3 years where we went 3 years in a row of wide receivers, where we know that what they were really trying to do was they were trying to get Joey Harrington weapons. Back then, I remember thinking, what are what's this knucklehead doing, drafting all of these receivers? But what he was really doing was he was trying to get Joey Harrington some weapons. So he brought in 3 receivers in a row to give him some guys to throw the ball to. Now, Roy Williams, for what it's worth, had a decent Lions career. Let's see what it says about that trade. It says Detroit turned a declining receiver into a first-round pick, a third-round pick, and a sixth-round pick. See, that I didn't remember, and this was in 2008. The Cowboys immediately gave Williams a massive extension, but he never lived up to expectations. Many analysts still consider this one of the best value trades the Lions ever made, and I would be on board with that. He was just okay when he was with the Lions, and he was already declining. And the Lions, I didn't realize they was able to get a first-round pick out of that. They were able to, you might as well say, fleece the Cowboys out of their picks to bring Roy Williams in. For them to get Roy Williams, he didn't really pan out with the Cowboys. He was mediocre with the Cowboys, and the Lions got a good value for that pick. Which brings us to number 1, and this is somebody that to be very honest with you, I already knew he was already number 1 on my list. I knew that this was the best trade that the Lions ever made, but that is quarterback Jared Goff. Now, we already know pretty much why this trade was so big, but what we're going to do is we're going to read a little bit about what this said about why Jared Goff was such a big pick. Jared Goff and draft picks traded for Matthew Stafford. It says Lions received Jared Goff, 2 first-round picks, and a third-round pick. Those assets helped accelerate the rebuild under Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. The trade led directly to the Lions becoming an NFC contender, while the Rams won a Super Bowl with Stafford, making it one of the rare, true win-win blockbuster trades in NFL history. And I am going to 100% agree with that. Listen, it was a win-win. The Rams thought that they were a number 1 quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl, a number 1 strong arm quarterback, and they were. So they got Matthew Stafford and got their Super Bowl. The Lions got no matter what some of you want to think about Jared Goff, the Lions got an absolute franchise quarterback. They traded a franchise quarterback and got another franchise quarterback in return. You rarely see that. In my opinion, Jared Goff has been solid. I am a Jared Goff backer. There are times that he drives me crazy because he's so stiff-footed and he can't move. He's a statue. But what better were you going to get? You can't get rid of him and get anything better. And to get rid of Matthew Stafford, you absolutely got something better in Jared Goff. So I do agree that this is the number 1 trade in Lions history. And as the article said, it absolutely helped the Lions catapult to where the Lions are now, where they are every year. Even last year in 2025, they are NFC favorites to possibly make it to the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. Jared Goff, the best Lions trade. So there you are, Lions fans. I want to give you something to think about, when they're talking about, who, where all of these, why the Lions never are in these big trades, and the Lions are usually not in any big trades. But those are 5 trades the Lions made, top 5 trades in Lions in the Lions football history. What do you think about it? Dick LeBeau, Chris Spillman, Bobby Lane, Roy Williams, and Jared Goff. Lions fans, give us your thoughts, what you think about the Lions trades. And do you think that the Lions still need to make a trade in 2026 to still put the Lions over the edge, or are you happy with where the Lions are sitting at now? All right, people, if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so we can keep talking Lions football. That's all for this one. Until next time, peace.